When Winter Soldier begins, the story, instead of opening with the big boat fight like in the James Bond film, it opens with a mundane jog. And immediately the series setting of Washington DC is established, but at the same time, as an audience we find our footing through a playful and teasing relationship.
Don't say it! Don't you say it! Left. Come on!
Between Captain America and Falcon. Sam is representative of the ordinary man, and the story establishes an optimistic tone by showing that the ordinary person is on the right path. But Captain America is just a bit ahead, and that foresight is his superpower. Something that is more important than his ability to punch people. A moment that solidifies this is after the run. Through Sam's eyes, we look up to Steve. He's a big figure, more than a man, a symbol towering over us.
Sam Wilson.
Steve Rogers.
I kind of put that together.
But then he immediately puts his hand out and pulls up Sam. Without any line of dialogue, we're immediately pulled into an oddly symbiotic relationship. Steve is the superior man inviting others to become better, while Sam gives wings to Steve by simply being on the same path and contributing to the same positive judgment of the present.
Marvin Gaye, 1972 Trouble Man soundtrack. Everything you missed, jammed into one album.
I'll put it on the list.
All of this symbolized by the notepad, which is also a fun punchline, and if you hadn't seen Captain America 1 or the Avengers, in this one image, immediately you'll confidently understand that he's a man out of time, both culturally and literally. But then there's the iconography of the phone. The details and color is in contrast. It's oddly cold. One is a connection from a common interest and the other is a professional connection. This analog media versus digital media is the big difference between Steve and Nat, but is the big similarity between Sam and Steve. So the purpose of this essay is to dive in and have some fun in exploring this relationship.
I do what he does, just slower. I make breakfast. You guys eat that sort of thing.
The difference between Natasha and Sam is that she is representative of an outsider. In her introduction, after Sam and Steve finishes their run, she appears in the car to pick up Steve.
Hey fellas.
She was also the other person on the other side of the text. Therefore, she's someone who's part of the system as opposed to an individual who identifies herself as a subject to it. In other words, she's connected to the phone and not the notebook. Subsequently, she represents the digital era, not the analog, a shared job, not a shared interest. She's attractive to Sam, but that attraction comes from a deceptive charm.
How you doing?
Hey.
And that in itself also represents what S.H.I.E.L.D. is, attractive by deception. In the case for Steve, it's from his service towards moral simplicity.
And I thought I could throw myself back in.
So then in the story, when all the deceptions and horrifying revelations happen, who is there for Steve and Nat? Well, Sam, of course.
Everyone we know is trying to kill us.
Not everyone.
Sam is secretly the most important character in The Winter Soldier because not only does he support the main characters, but he is the thematic support system for the entire story. Winter Soldier has a deeply bleak vision of surveillance society, algorithmically determined culture, computational politics, and fear culture. But at the center of this setting is an optimistic opinion framing it. Steve represents a nostalgic position of a time before the complexity and alienating nature of all of this, but then Sam represents a negotiation with this feeling, because he's someone who isn't looking at the present through the lens of the past, but looking at a possible future through the lens of the present. Both characters provide each other grounding and a connection that allow themselves to relate and express clearly their convictions with confidence.
I can't ask you to do this, Sam. You got out for a good reason.
Dude, Captain America needs my help. There's no better reason to get back in.
And subsequently maintains an actively good spirit that the rest of the story needs for the climax. Steve entrusts the good people of S.H.I.E.L.D. to fight for a culture of freedom and trust against the rising culture of fear. And we know there are good people because Sam, by simply being around, reinforces this optimism.
Did you write that down first? What's it off the top of your head?
Even though we were introduced to him as a man trying his best to keep up, ironically that's what makes him above everyone else. Sam in Age of Ultron is used primarily as a creative comma to try and acknowledge the great deal of momentum generated in the Winter Soldier's ending.
Very happy chasing cold leads on our missing persons case.
Therefore, nothing particularly substantial happens apart from Falcon joining the Avengers. Despite having retired, Sam finds relevance and a sense of duty fighting the good fight, which is what he's doing in Civil War. Before he worked as a VA looking after veterans, and now he's looking after the Avengers as the eye in the sky. In both Civil War and Infinity War, Falcon is once again the most dependable character. He's there to support Steve in saving Bucky from Black Panther and the authorities. He pulls in Scott for Steve's mini squad. He returns to War Machine after he gets blasted. He's there with Steve and Nat to save Wanda and Vision, and he's one of the heroes flying in headsfirst during the Battle of Wakanda, and then charging into Thanos. All of Sam's actions are related to looking after or standing up for someone, but why is that? The main backstory we get is defined by Sam explaining the loss of Riley, his partner in the Air Force, who was killed on an ordinary mission.
Regret?
You lose someone?
My wingman, Riley. Flying a night mission. Standard PJ rescue op. Nothing we hadn't done 1,000 times before. Till RPG knocked Riley's dumbass out of the sky. Nothing I could do. It's like I was up there just to watch. Sorry. After that, I had a really hard time finding a reason for being over there, you know?
But you happy now? Back in the world?
Hey, the number of people giving me orders is down to about 0. So hell yeah.
Sam is defined by the randomness of his life, in the sense that being a deeply free spirit is in itself his superpower. His best friend died, so instead of allowing the trauma to smash his sense of continuity, he reinvents himself as a counselor who looks after others with trauma, so the painful past can then be positively involved in his present.
What unit you with?
58th Pararescue. But now I'm working down at the VA.
His military career actually made him prefer to sleep on rocks as opposed to a comfy bed. Bumping into Steve in public made him a new best friend. He joins the hunt for Bucky and the Avengers so then he can use his skills positively. Sam finds power in being adaptable and supportive because that allows him to master the randomness of his life. It's an incredibly fun way to contextualize a character whose defining symbolic value is flying around in a big set of wings. And also that mastery is also what provides Steve a sense to adapt himself.
Some stuff you leave there, other stuff you bring back. It's our job to figure out how to carry it. Is it going to be in a big suitcase or in a little man purse? It's up to you.
In Sam's big return in Endgame, he teases Cap by being the one who leads the charge of the reinforcement.
Captain Sam, can you hear me? On your left.
Which on one hand is just a fun reference, but on the other hand it also spotlights that Steve had also learned a lot from Sam this whole time, and now very subtly he's ahead of Steve. Because when Sam dies in Infinity War, Steve carries on his legacy by becoming a counselor for those still trying to overcome the trauma of those who were lost. Why do I keep phrasing things in the stupidest way possible? Steve isn't judging the present with the values of the past, but by judging the future with the present.
The world is in our hands. It's left to us, guys.
A lesson that was innately socialized into him because he made a friend in the randomness of his own life. Steve never talks about Sam in this chunk of the film, but his presence can be felt because Sam had taught Steve something that isn't in words but in attitude.
Seriously, you could do whatever you want to do. What makes you happy?
I don't know.
Therefore, it makes a lot of sense that Steve gives Sam the shield and the Captain America identity. Their friendship came from sharing and teaching each other culture and lessons in life. If Steve and Bucky's relationship was an opposites attract kind of deal, then Sam and Steve are kindred spirits.
The people that shoot at you usually wind up shooting at me.
Therefore, just as how Steve was simply a guy who wanted to serve, didn't want particularly anything grand in life or from his identity, he got the chance because someone chose him. And now, like Erskine, Steve chooses Sam because he sees exactly that. Captain America and Falcon are an important duo because thematically they support each other's values. In the absence of Sam, Steve becomes a counselor. In the absence of Captain America, Falcon inherits the shield. They very subtly provide the backbone that supports the rest of the MCU because the universe needs that symbolic reliability, and that's what they offer. And I think this is why the whole universe feels oddly real in terms of the dynamics of the people that populates it. There's a real sense of diversity from the paired relationships. Steve and Nat grew from a coldly professional relationship to a mentor relationship to becoming equals. Tony and Peter explored the feeling of anxiety that comes from connections. Vision and Wanda fell in love with a symbiotic relationship, and Tony and Rhodey supported each other because of how simply different they were. But in contrast, Steve and Sam supported each other precisely because of how similar they are. There's a whole spectrum of interpersonal possibilities locked inside each pair, and this is why Captain America and Falcon are important. They show that this can be unlocked by a simple bit of light-hearted teasing.
Heavier than you look.
I had a big breakfast.